Okay, there we go. I think we're live. So BJ, tell me about your nephew. Tell me what happened with your nephew.
Wow, we're going to get right into the big topic. About, I would say 14 or so years ago, my nephew, whose name's Garrett, ended up being addicted to opioids. And it started I think this is how it started. He was wrestling in high school and his coach started him on steroids or somehow as part of the culture. And then using that led to other things till he had this addiction. And at the time, even though I was a behavior scientist, I'd never studied addiction and I didn't claim any expertise there. So I, like the rest of my family, we were just doing the best we could to help him. And so he was in a few recovery programs, residential recovery programs, and they were crazy expensive, but we were just doing what we could to help him. And he really struggled with it. And I remember some of this I haven't shared. I hope I don't break down and cry. I remember him driving my partner and myself to the airport, and he was snapping his wrist with a rubber band. And it didn't strike me till I was on the plane. I was like, what is he trying to do? Is he doing, was he having urges and was he trying to use that to train himself not to? And he was, then kind of fell off the wagon and went back into a recovery program and was doing, and even had a big tattoo printed here on the side of his body that I don't know what the name of it is, but it's kind of a famous poem or a famous saying for people who are working on recovery. So he's that serious about it that he wanted,
like the Serenity Prayer or something like that.
Yes, it was that. And when I first saw it, I was like, why'd you do that? And I didn't put all the pieces together because I'd only see him occasionally. And so he was trying so hard, I think it was like 18, 19 years old going through this. And then I was in Amsterdam giving a talk. And my partner and I were in Amsterdam, and the day I gave the talk, and then there was a reception that night. It was the kickoff day. We got back to the hotel room late, and I got a text from my brother saying, Garrett died. He overdosed. And I didn't even question that because you would never send a text like that joking. So I was like, Denny, we're packing our bags. We're going to Las Vegas. He was in Las Vegas. We're going to go see my sister. So we just packed the bags. We didn't even consider other options because it's like, yeah, of course we're going home. We're not staying in the conference. And so we made the journey back to be with my sister and her family during this terribly hard time. And I've come to understand what happened was he had been sober for like 6 months or a while anyway, 6 months or longer. And then something happened in his life that was a real setback or something discouraging. And he went back to his old dose of OxyContin. And he didn't apparently have the tolerance for that. And it killed him. And so it wasn't an intentional overdose. It was just that he really got trapped with OxyContin, and we did everything we knew how to do at the time. Yeah. But still, it was just heartbreaking. And the family, and especially my sister, his mom, has just never gotten over that. And so, but her view on this, and this is why, Tim, I'm fine that we're talking and even starting here. Her view on this once, even during the family gathering, she says, look, we're not keeping this a secret. There at the time, there still was a stigma around these kinds of things. And I imagine there still is, but less so. She says, no, we're talking about this. We're sharing it. We are going to help other families in this situation. We're not going to hide this. And we're going to be as helpful and as transparent as we can be with families and people who are trapped in addiction and do what we can. So that's my personal connection. And now I have a different view. And I think I have a little more sophisticated view of what we could have done. But man, what a hard problem. And he was a good kid. And he worked so hard to overcome this. And things just didn't work out. And that was just crushing, just heartbreaking.
How long ago was that?
That would have been about 2009 or something like that. Yeah.
Okay. So looking back, and you know what, I'm going to stop there. I'm going to introduce you. So I'm here today with Dr. BJ Fogg. My name is Tim Westbrook. We're on I Love Being Sober. I love being sober. I love my life today. And BJ Fogg is a behavior scientist at Stanford, where he directs the research and innovation at the Behavior Design Lab. He also teaches his models and methods in graduate seminars. His early work on persuasive technology has informed the design of products that millions love and use every day, including Instagram, which was co-founded by one of his students. So BJ has created a new method of habit formation called Tiny Habits, and using his online platform and his email, he has personally coached over 40,000 people in creating new habits. Fortune magazine actually named BJ as the new guru you should know for his insights about mobile and social networks. Tiny Habits is rated as the #1 business book of 2020.
So far.
So far. Yeah, we're not at the end of the year, right?
Yes.
And so this is his book right here. It's Tiny Habits. If you want to read an amazing book, this is it. And today we're going to talk about habits as they relate to people in recovery from addiction. And so we're talking about his nephew, Garrett, who overdosed a few years ago, and I think you said 2009. And so hindsight being 2020, it's like, okay, he had been through treatment. He had gotten into recovery. He had the Serenity Prayer tattooed on his body. And he was like, as far as you guys were concerned, he had this thing, right?
Well, you know, we had friends who also had kids that were really trapped, and they were like, don't underestimate this problem. And they were right. It was tough. But yeah, we thought, hey, he's been in recovery a while, fine. And we just never, we worried, but we just thought, we thought he was on his way. You know, we thought he was free and clear. And certainly we're less concerned about it. And then just that day, things went wrong for him, and he made a bad decision, a bad calculation, and bam, that was it.
Right. And so what if he had learned the Tiny Habits approach, like how could your method have helped him?
Yeah, that's a really good, hard question. I think knowing what I know now, and I'm not an expert in this, Tim, and I want to be clear to everybody listening to this. I'm a behavior scientist, and I mostly study and help people create habits, which is different than breaking them. And yes, I have a method for breaking habits, but when it gets to these areas of addiction, it's a whole different, I mean, yes, it all comes back to behaviors, but it's way more complicated. Creating habits is pretty straightforward. Especially use the Tiny Habits method. You can create habits quickly and easily. But I've really come to respect and not underestimate the challenges of addiction, in part because it's so serious in our families' lives, and I've had friends who have struggled with it. And in part because there are people who've written books about habits that will mislead you. They trivialize how easy it is. And that really upsets me. There's a big selling book out there, massively selling book, that claims on the cover to have a proven way to break bad habits. I think that is not true. And people listening to this who have struggled with addiction, if there were a proven way, you would have done it, right? And you wouldn't be struggling so much, right? So for somebody to mislead thousands and thousands of people that here's the proven way, and then when they try it and it doesn't succeed, they blame themselves rather than this person who's making this claim. So we just need to really take it. We need a lot more innovation in the space. We need a lot more attention. So Tim, I so appreciate what you're doing. I think what I know now, and I know a lot about creating habits, and I have a method for stopping habits, but addictions, even in my book, I say, this is a whole different thing. People, go get professional help if you have a habit that's life-threatening. This book, any book, is not your answer. Go find an expert. So certainly, we tried to find experts for Garrett. But the other thing I think I would have done, and this is my answer after that long preamble, is I would have taken seriously, I understood at the time that environment, it has a big effect on our behavior. I knew that at the time, but I had never thought of it in terms of Garrett and his addiction. And I think if I could rewind back to, say, 2007, 2008, I would have probably sat down with my family and said, look, if we want to save Garrett's life, we need to move him out of Las Vegas. We need to move him to a domain where he doesn't have access to these drugs, where he's surrounded by friends who are not using, and never let him return to Las Vegas. And I think I would have been that serious. We need to put him in a completely different environment, right, where the social world around him is different, and where he doesn't know drug dealers, and I'd probably put on the table, like, we can make the choice of either saving Garrett or not. And the way that, and so this may not be the right answer, but that's probably how I would deal with it now. I would say we have a decision to make. And it really comes down to whether we're going to keep Garrett in our lives or run the risk of losing him. And it does match, how I think about behavior today. There are 3 ways to create lasting change. One is to have an epiphany, but you can't design that. There's no way to give Garrett or anybody else this epiphany where they suddenly see the world differently, and they happen, but we can't design that for other people. So take that off the table. So then you're left with changing your environment and taking small steps in creating habits in these small ways. And both of those can work together. So in the case of this really tough challenge with Garrett, it would have been, we got to get him in a totally different environment and help him create habits that are positive and uplifting. So his identity shifts and he thinks of himself in a different way. So that would be my thinking now. But I just don't want to pretend like I have expertise that I don't. And my media coach says, don't ever say that, BJ. But this is such a serious topic that there are people like you, Tim, and others that specialize in this. And so I'll give my view based on what I know of behavior in general. And so I'm pretty confident of saying one of the answers is a radical change in environment. The people around you, the places you go, what you're doing, like, let's move them to Costa Rica, have him live in Costa Rica on a farm that's organic, and he works all day, and he's like a whole different person because the environment and social world around him is totally different.
Yeah, I think so in my opinion, there's treatment, which is clinical work, right? That's where they dig deep, they do lots of therapy, they find out what's underneath, right? Because addiction, the behavior is a solution to the pain. So it's kind of like, first we've got to figure out what's underneath it. And that's why I'm such a big fan of treatment. But then after treatment, okay, this is where the new lifestyle habits come into play. Yeah. And I've heard you talk about this as well. It's developing new healthy lifestyle habits, new healthy behaviors to replace the old unhealthy behaviors, combined with a geographic, making it hard because in your tiny habits approach, which is behavior modification equals motivation, ability, and prompt, right? So moving to another city or state or Costa Rica or whatever, and being around people that live healthy lifestyles, it's like all of those things come into play. Yeah.
And I know a lot about that. I know a lot about how do you create habits, how do you help shift identity, and so on. And, for people that are struggling with addiction, or people who are, you certainly can help them create new positive habits in their life. And that certainly will be a benefit. It's not the whole answer. And that's kind of what I want to make clear in my book and here. But it's part of, I would think, part of the ultimate solution. And the fact of the matter is, creating new habits is really not that hard if you do it in the right way.
Yeah, and I would say, so let's pretend that we're talking about someone who they've already gone to treatment, they've already done the clinical work, and now it's like, okay, now they're going from treatment what's the next step in developing this new life?
Yeah, well, I imagine part of the treatment is helping you get different friends, cutting ties from the bad influences, and so on. And so I won't go into that. But from a creating new habits perspective, in the Tiny Habits method, you pick any aspiration that you want. So let's say that you want to have less stress in your life. So you start at this high level, and you can be really ambitious. I mean, the method's called Tiny Habits, but part of the method is to be really ambitious. Like, what do you really want? And then you come up with, and I call this magic wanding. So say you want to have less stress in your life. You know, pretty straightforward. Most people have that, especially these days. And then the next step is to, and I call it magic wanding. You pretend like you have a magic wand, and you can get yourself to do any behavior that would lead to what you want, in this case, reducing stress. It might be weight loss. It might be more productivity. It might be sleeping better. But you imagine you have magical powers, and you can get yourself to do any behavior that would lead to that. And it's like a brainstorm, and come up with 20 or 30 different behaviors. And for reducing stress, it might be meditate for an hour a day. It might be read the New Testament daily. It might be express my gratitude every day to my spouse. And you come up with a whole bunch of those. And then the next step is you pick among them. So you don't do all 30. After the brainstorm, then you prioritize, and you pick based on 3 criteria. Which of these new habits will actually be effective in reducing my stress? Or if you're working on productivity, effective in productivity or sleep or whatever you're working on. So effectiveness. Next criteria, which one of these habits do I want to do? So if you don't want to meditate, don't pick that one. Okay? Behaviors you don't want to do almost never become true habits. But you may want to read the New Testament. You may want to express gratitude to your spouse, and so on. And the third one is, which of these behaviors can I do? So those are the 3 criteria: impact, motivation, you want to do it, and ability, you can do it. And so of the 20 or 30 items you brainstorm, pick, and I call this the golden behavior. The golden behaviors, and you can do more than one. Don't believe people to say one habit at a time. That's not true. So pick, I'll say 3 different golden behaviors, and then you use the Tiny Habits method to turn those into habits. So I'll pause there for a little bit, Tim. We haven't gotten the Tiny Habits method, but we did go from pick what do you want? I mean, and think big, come up with a whole bunch of behavior options, and then pick the golden behaviors. Okay. So don't guess at your habits. Don't just guess, oh, I'm going to meditate to reduce my stress. That's just a guess. You can systematically come up with something that's way better than guessing. And that's what I walk people through in the book, Tiny Habits, is how do you figure out what are the right habits for you? And it's different for different people. Even though lots of people want to reduce their stress, the actual habits to help you get there might be very different between you and your spouse, for example.
Okay. And one of the things you say is help people do what they already want to do.
Yeah, bam. And yes, and that's part of golden behaviors, is pick behaviors that you want to do. Let me give a slightly different example to help highlight this point. So I'm living in Maui now, and I've been here about a year. And talk about change of environment, right? I'm behaving differently here than I do in California. But the point is, I like being active every day. And here in Maui, what I do every day is I go surfing. Surfing is hard work. And this morning when I came home, I was tired, and out in the waves, I was tired, and it was hard, but I was loving it. And so that's an example of like a 1-hour workout I do every day. That is hard, but I want to do it. In fact, like I watch the clock, and like 4:15 rolls around in the morning, and I'm like, come on, come on, come on, come on. And then I sit out on the lanai, and I just watch for the night to get the lightest hint of light. It's like, no, I can go. So, I mean, that to me is an indicator that I really want to do that. So if you can find a behavior that you really like doing, that then takes you to the aspiration, it's easy to wire that in as a habit. And don't discount. I mean, people might be thinking about nutrition and go, oh, I need to eat better snacks, but I don't like healthy snacks. Well, guess what? Try a whole bunch of healthy snacks and find the one you like the most.
You got to keep on going. Yeah.
Yeah, try it. And my sister, who trains the coaches in Tiny Habits, she's oversees all the training, and she's really good at the Tiny Habits method. She likens it to trying on shoes. So don't just guess at a pair of shoes and say, I'll buy those. Try them on, try things, and see what works for you. And it's a process often of trying stuff. And if it works, keep going. And if it doesn't, put the shoes back up on the rack, or let that idea go and pick a different habit that will help you reduce your stress or be active or whatever you want. And so that's one thing that's very different in my method than other methods, is I advocate for help yourself do habits you already want to do. And don't think you're going to pick a habit you don't want to do and somehow tack on or bolt on motivation after the fact. Pick habits that you're motivated to do. If you find yourself bolting on motivation later, like, oh, I need an accountability partner, I need to trash talk myself, I need to donate, make a donation to a politician I hate if I fail on this. I mean, those are all motivational techniques that are a signal that you don't actually want that new habit. It's a should, not a want. Focus on your wants.
Okay, so typically, or a lot of times when someone first gets clean and sober, the suggestion is to work a 12-step program. So it's like work a 12, and the suggestions are: go to a meeting every day, call your sponsor every day, write a gratitude list, hit your knees. And a lot of times these are things that people don't want to do, but it's like, hey, these are the suggestions. You got to go. And one of the things they say is you got to keep on going to meetings until you like going to meetings, which is similar to, you got to keep on, I swim occasionally, and I had to keep on swimming until I like swimming. If I'm going to do Ironman, I got to be able to swim. So I got to keep on swimming until I like swimming. So what do you have to say about that?
Oh, I don't want to undermine or undercut AA and how good that is for many people. And I'm not an expert on it, but there's different ways to change your behavior. And I would assume there's different ways to tackle addictions, and AA is one of them. And find the program, the product, the expert that's going to help you in your way. That's what I would say, is like there's different ways, there are different means to an end. And if AA and that program works for you, awesome, go for it. If it doesn't, look for experts and programs that are more of a fit for you. That would be my generic advice. But I don't want to mislead people. I mean, explore all your options, people. Just explore your options, and don't get discouraged if the first thing you try doesn't work. I mean, part of the Tiny Habits method, at least in creating habits, is to practice and revise. So you try something, and if it's not working, revise it. So part of it is iterating and figuring out what works for you. And you don't have to be perfect, at least not in creating habits. I don't want to suggest that for like a serious drug, right? Because one misstep can be game over. So it's a different thing. But what I do feel confident saying is explore and try things. And if it doesn't work for you, don't beat yourself up. Don't feel like you are flawed. The program isn't a very good fit for you. Look for somebody else or some other program that is.
Okay, so and going back to like new lifestyle habits. So a person that is active in their addiction, they drink as a solution to the pain. They use as a solution to the pain. They get triggered, which is the prompt, right? Yeah. And then they go and they drink and they use, or they go look at Facebook excessively, or they eat, they overeat, they binge and purge. There's so many different behaviors. And those are the solutions. Those are the things that they want to do. Those are the things that are causing damage. And it's like the path of least resistance is to do what I already know how to do. I already know that this drink or this hit or whatever is going to make me feel better. So
Well, let me share a couple angles on this. And now I'm going to go into my personal experience with drinking.
Okay.
I didn't drink at all, like at all. I grew up Mormon, okay? And so, of course, I didn't drink, and I never thought I would. But I left Mormonism because I'm gay, and I have a partner that I've been with for 30 years. That doesn't really work with Mormonism. But still, we didn't drink. I mean, he was also Mormon. I tried it. And I was like, this is gross. This is disgusting. Why do you guys like this? But then we bought a place up in California, wine country. And we didn't go there for the wine. We went there because nature was beautiful and it was by a river, and I love outdoors and I love water. But being part of that culture in wine country, pretty much all of the activities had wine involved. The city would have this weekly band dance fest. It was a drinking festival for the people of the town. You go to the movie theaters and they serve wine. It was everywhere. And then people stepped up to coach us in wine and wine tasting. So we did develop a palate for it. So then I started enjoying it, and then it became a regular part of my life. Go to parties and you would drink wine. And that was really the only thing I would drink is wine, because that's what the culture was. And so I really saw the impact of, now that I've moved to wine country, I went from not being able to stand wine to being part of pretty much my daily life. I don't think I had a huge issue with it, but I recognized that, wow, this is part of my life and part of what we do here. And then one day, and I can't even, I mean, this was about 3 years ago. I was just like, I'm done with alcohol. I'm just done. I'm stopping. And I was driving home from a friend's wedding in Tahoe when I was deciding this. And I was like, yep, I'm done. And I didn't know what my partner would say, because he liked sitting out on our patio and looking over the river and watching the birds and the wildlife. And there was this ritual we would do. And I knew he loved that. And it was a way to cope with the stress, like what you're talking about. And I clearly recognize it in myself and my neighbors. In fact, I shouldn't say this, but I will. I guess part of me saying I'm done with it was I thought through my neighborhood and all my neighbors, and I couldn't think of a single person that didn't have a problem with alcohol from my perspective, not one. And I was like, oh my gosh, so this is where it might be headed for me. I can't think of anybody in my neighborhood. And now that may not be true, but I couldn't think of anyone. And I was like, okay, here we are, wine country, and it's everywhere, and people are using it to soothe themselves. Yes, it's at parties, it's at restaurants, it's at the movie theaters. But I knew a lot of people in the evening would stay home, watch TV, and drink alone. I knew that. And I was like, that can't be my future. So went home, and the first evening out on the patio, I just told my partner, I said, Denny, I'm not drinking tonight. I'm just going to have water. He's like, what? And I was like, yeah, I'm just going to have water. I didn't say anything more than that. And then the next night we sat and I pulled out the water. I sat down and he looked at me and he's like, you're not going back Mormon on me, are you? You're not becoming. I was like, no, I just decided I'm not going to drink for a while. I'm just not going to have a drink. He's like, fine. And I didn't want to say I'm done with it. And I didn't want to have this big discussion because it was sort of, I didn't want to impose on him, and I didn't want him to make him feel bad or guilty because he wanted to have his drinks in the evening. And then about 2 weeks later, and it was hard at first, but not terribly hard. It was easier than I thought. And then about 2 weeks later, he says, guess what? I'm going to join you. I'm going to stop drinking too. And I said, great. And we did. And we've stopped ever since then. And I think I was able to do it with relative ease. I actually thought it would be really hard, and it wasn't as hard as I thought. And the benefits were way bigger than I expected. In fact, I remember telling Denny and others, like, why didn't anybody tell me all these benefits you get from not drinking? If somebody just outlined all the benefits, I might have considered this sooner, but nobody in wine country talks about this. But I think I was able to do it, Tim, because I'd already practiced changing my behavior. And that's what Tiny Habits and the method is about. You are learning to change. Just like you learn to drive at the first it seems really intimidating, but you develop the skills and then you just get in the car and go from point A to point B. And that's how it can feel behavior change. So I already had skills of behavior change because I'd been practicing them in tiny habits. And I'd already toyed around, and I recognize this in retrospect. I'd already toyed around with untangling the habit of drinking. So as you know in my book, Tim, I don't talk about breaking bad habits. It's untangling the bad habits. And I recognize in retrospect that there were like business mixers I went to, and I'd say, no, I'm not drinking tonight. Or on the plane where normally I would have, red wine or something. And I say, no, just bring me sparkling water with lime. So I'd already practiced saying no in social situations like that. And that, I think, gave me the hope and the courage that I could untangle the other pieces. And one of the toughest tangles in the middle was that evening routine that my partner had. But I'd already done a few things here and there, and I was like, yeah, I can do this. And I didn't make a big proclamation. I didn't declare it on Facebook and so on. It's like, no, I'm just going to do this and see how it goes. And I do think looking at that habit, not as just, yes, there was a sudden break, but I worked up to it by untangling. Oh, I went to this party that we usually drink. I told the hostess, and I use the tiny habits method. I said, after the hostess invites me to have a drink, I'll say, I'm not drinking tonight. I'll stick with water. That's like a tiny habit recipe. And you can try this. After somebody at a party or a business mixer says, have a drink, say, I'm not drinking tonight. I'm sticking with water. That takes 4 seconds. And then guess what? A good host or hostess will never offer you a drink again. And when you go back to her house or go back to the party, they'll know you don't drink. So having practiced, I guess, in preparation for this, maybe that's why on my drive home from Tahoe, I was like, this alcohol thing is not really serving me. Yeah, it's not destroying my life yet, but it might. So now's the time, and let's give it a shot. I'm going to just stop entirely. There were times when I tried to taper back, like, oh, I'm just, rather than 2 drinks, I'm going to have 1. Or I'd rather than party having 4 drinks, I'm only going to have 2. And for me, the tapering thing, the moderation, all things, no. And I knew from breaking other habits, like I had a serious popcorn addiction, and I know people think it's comical, but it's not when it's you and you're seriously not good because you eat so much popcorn. I knew that just the moderation in all things did not work for me. And so when people say that and talk about substances or whatever, it's moderation, all things, I'm like, I don't believe that. Well, at least it's not true for me.
Well, it's kind of like quitting something 98% is harder than quitting something 100%, right? Mm-hmm. Because when you make the decision, you don't even have, there's no decision fatigue, right?
Right.
Because the decision's already made.
It's policy. Yeah, I don't drink. No, I don't drink. I'm sticking with water. Yeah, and so it is easier. Now, maybe it works for somebody to moderate, like moderation, but I just found for me that wasn't the answer, because I would always go back to, the bigger behavior. And I think you're right. There's no decisions. You go to a party or a mixer, or you're on the plane, and you're not thinking, do I have red wine or white wine or something, some other, it's done. You're not having any of those things.
I remember when I met with Jean Collins, who works at the Meadows now, and she saw I remember she was basically telling me that I was an alcoholic and I had a drinking problem. And I was like, I don't have a problem. I'm good. She's like, well, why don't you cut down? Or actually, she had me quit drinking for a while. And then she had me try moderate drinking. And we agreed that it was going to be 2 to 4 drinks 2 times a week. And then, now I'm thinking, okay, is tonight going to be the night that I drink? Yeah. And I could only have up to 4 drinks. So guess what those drinks look like?
Boom. Top them off.
Yeah. I mean, it's like the 18% 32 ounce beer was the one drink, right? So yeah, that
wouldn't have worked for me either, because then it would have been like this experience I would look forward to and I would overdo. And no, so I think for me, it was like kind of a warm-up or a confidence builder by in these specific situations. So the way I talk about untangling bad habits is, think of a tangled rope. And a issue like drinking isn't just one habit. It's like, oh, drink on the plane, you drink at business mixers, you drink at this party, you drink in the evenings, you drink with dinner, whatever. So think of those as snarls in this knot. And you start with the easiest one first, not the hardest, the easiest one, and you untangle it. And you do that by removing motivation or removing ability or removing the prompt.
Okay.
And I guess that's what I had kind of done intuitively. And then once you start making progress in untangling, then I think for something like this, you can make the big leap and go, nope, I'm stopping completely. And I think it gave me confidence and hope somewhere in my brain. I guess I had a sense of, I can do this. Whereas a few years earlier, Tim, I remember two of our neighbors, they came to a little community potluck and they're like, oh, we're not drinking. We're in AA now and we're not drinking. And I was like, wow, well, first of all, I didn't know you had a problem with it. I mean, how naive I was. I'm assuming they had a huge problem. If they're in AA, they may not have had a big problem. And then the friend, and his name was Dale, said, oh, and by the way, we've lost our palate for wine. We've lost the taste for it. And I was like, no, in my mind, it's like, no, you haven't. How could that possibly be true? But the fact that they shared that with me stuck with me. And it's like, well, if Dale and his wife stopped and they say they lost the urge and lost the palate, these are really smart people. And I was like, oh my gosh, I didn't even think that happened. I thought you just got, because of my other neighbors just seemed to get deeper and deeper and deeper into this problem. So I think that, and that's part of why I want, I said yes to talking to you, and I'm being so transparent in ways that I haven't in other forums, because maybe something I will say will help move you forward, just like Dale and his wife saying, yeah, we've stopped, and Dale saying, well, yeah, I lost the taste for it. I don't even crave it anymore. That gave me like this sense of, wow, that's possible. I didn't actually think that was possible, because the trends I saw all around me was you just get deeper and deeper into it.
So do you think that him saying that he lost the taste for it, do you think that's just more of a him saying it publicly? Like why do you think that worked?
He had no reason to tell me that. And it was just to me. It was not an announcement.
Okay.
And they didn't announce it to the group. It was just, I think I'd probably offered them some wine, and he and I are kind of like would nerd out about the weather and technology. So we're kind of like, friends in that way. He just, I don't know why he shared that, but I'm so glad he did, because it opened that possibility to me.
Right.
And now that I'm here, it's like, oh yeah, you do lose the taste for it. Now, there are times when you want to calm yourself. There's times when you want soothing, and you do it in other ways. It's not, the thought is not, oh God, I need a drink. It's not that thought anymore. And, if I were to rewind 5 years, I might question that. But now that I'm here, it's like, at least for some people, and unfortunately I'm in that category, where it's like, there's no big craving. And now even when I see wine bottles or people drinking, there's no big craving. It's just like, oh, you're drinking that, I'm drinking Perrier.
Yeah.
Fine. And at parties, Tim, I'll add one more tip. I thought people would think I was going to be really boring and not fun. I think one of the reasons people drink is so they feel like they can be livelier. So I kind of turned up the volume on being outgoing and fun and crazy, but yet not drinking. And it totally worked, right? So I still get invited to parties and I have a blast and I have so much fun. And it's not because I'm drinking. It's just because, hey, we're here to relax. Let's have a great time.
Well, it's being childlike, right?
Yeah, in some ways. Yeah, it's being like, goofball. Yeah, having fun.
Being a goofball. I mean, I remember I couldn't dance without having a couple of drinks. Now I mean, I don't really care. It's and going back to, I'm a person in long-term recovery, and the thought of having a drink, does not cross my mind ever. It's nothing that I ever want to try. And I,
Isn't that great?
yeah, it's amazing. And, you know, whenever I get triggered, whenever I feel stressed out, you know, I mean, I've got these different things that I do. I pray, I meditate, I go do an ice bath, I sit in an infrared sauna.
So good.
You know what I mean? Like I
Yeah.
exercise, I run, I do yoga. I have all of these other behaviors and all these other habits that are in my life that I love it. And I don't ever want to go back to the drinking or the drug or anything else like that.
And that's how I feel. And I think it's important, probably really important for some people listening to hear that. Where you are and where I am, it's similar. There's not the temptation. It's not my thought. Yes, I get stressed, but there's other things that I do. One of them, surprisingly, is I play the recorder. Okay, do y'all remember back in grade school, you were like tortured having to play that little recorder? Well, I doubled down on it and I play a tenor, which is a big one, but it takes a lot of breath. And what that does is not only am I able to play music, but I'm breathing and I'm exhaling. So I'm creating something and I'm exhaling, and it's so calming. So that's one thing I do. Another is I garden. Even if it's as simple as herb gardening, I just take care of my herbs and eat a little bit of oregano or a little bit of rosemary. That's calming. Another thing that I do, kind of a newish thing I'm doing in Maui, is I'm training the geckos to come and eat out of my hands. And then I've gotten to understand sort of the gecko community and I recognize them. Watching the geckos is so calming. I know it sounds weird, but I guess my point is find those things that you do that work for you, whether it's playing a musical instrument. And I think I just lucked out with the recorder because the breathing for me is a type of meditation. Nature, you know, one of the things, and I know this isn't available to a lot of people, when I go jump in the ocean, which I do twice a day, bam, the ocean, or when I'm not by the ocean, just nature works for me like crazy. And so there are ways to manage stress and to calm. And alcohol just doesn't pop up as an option in my mind at all. And I'm so grateful for that. I just am.
So so now what I'm thinking about is, okay, going back to when someone's early in recovery, like the first thing, and maybe you can relate to this or maybe not, and I know I could relate to this, my you know, in early recovery, it's, you know, the first thought is a drink would be, again, the path of least resistance before the new habits are developed. So it's like, you know, how can someone find these new habits? And like to your point earlier, it's people need new eating habits, new sleeping habits, new exercise habits. They pray and meditate. They new friends, new like everything has to change if they want a new life.
But getting there is not as hard as it sounds. You don't have to do it all at once.
Right.
And if you pick habits that you want, it's a delight. It's a delight to say, oh, I am now playing the recorder twice a day. Oh, it's a delight to say, I get to watch the geckos and make friends with wild geckos. So don't think of it. And this is one of the problems with some other people when they talk about habits. It's like 66 days and it's drudgery. No, it's not. You can create habits by feeling good and have it be a delight as you bring these. That's why you pick habits that you want and you help yourself feel successful. So those things will come together faster and easier than people think if you do it in the right way. And yes, I think there was a period, I don't know how long it went, when there was this little urge like, man, a glass of wine would be great right now. In the early stages. That's not now.
Right.
And having my partner get on board with me was so helpful. I think I could have still worked it out without him. But one of the things that I advocate, and I have a chapter in my book on this, I call it Change Together. So if there is someone in your life and that can do it with you, especially if your partner drinks and you drink and you both say, great, we're going to stop and here's how we're doing it. Do it together, for sure. And then I liked how you went through your list, Tim. I didn't actually make a game plan like, hey, whenever I have an urge, I can do this and this and this and this and this. But in retrospect, I probably should have. I would have been more prepared. It's like, okay, in this moment where I'm stressed and I'm thinking, a drink would be great right now. Here's my list. Just pick anything on the list, BJ. And once you get started and the anxiety or the whatever issue you're trying to resolve starts resolving because you're watching geckos or playing whatever,
Right.
then that urge for like, I really need a drink right now, I predict will fade and go away. And it gets less and less strong over time. And I think that's what my friend Dale was talking about. It's like, we don't drink. And yeah, I just lost the taste for it, which seemed impossible. But now I'm here to tell you it can happen.
Yeah. Well, it's kind of like one day at a time, 1 hour at a time, 1 minute at a time. And one of the things they say in AA is this too shall pass.
That's it. Yes, that urge.
The urge will pass.
Fades. Will fade.
If you go and look at geckos for 5 minutes, the urge.
Okay, but Tim, I have a question for you.
Yeah.
So you're there and you get it. I'm there and I get it. But for the people who think, no, that's not going to happen, how do you give them faith or hope or confidence that this too shall pass? Is there a magical way or an effective way of helping people get it when they've tried and they've failed and they've had these setbacks and they're like, no, I'm different. I'm not like Tim. I'm not like BJ. What is the way to help them see they can progress?
Well, I think it's to your, changing together, right? Yeah. So finding people, surrounding yourself with people that are in recovery, people that want to be in recovery, people that want to be clean and sober, having a sponsor that you can call, having friends in recovery that you can call. Whenever you have that urge, you got to pick up the phone. You got to call your sponsor. Yeah. You've got to call your friend. If you hang out with your old friends, it's like impossible. It's impossible. You have to stay away from your old friends for a while. I mean, for a while. Yeah. Yeah. And when I say a while, I mean a while.
Well, especially if they're not going to support you. I had friends that were supportive. I show up at the parties and drinking was a component. When I said, I'm not drinking tonight, they were totally supportive. I mean, they were a little bit worried, like, oh my gosh, are you in crisis? It's like, no, I've just decided it's not serving me. And at the beginning, Tim, I admit if I had a meeting in the morning, I don't like lying, and it's a policy. I never say things that are untrue. But one of the excuses is I have a big meeting in the morning, which was generally true. I have a big meeting in the morning. I have to be 100%. So, yeah. I mean, in some situations where they weren't close friends and it was going to look funny, isn't that terrible that we have to have an excuse for not drinking in some social context? That's just awful. But that's the reality.
Well, I think that's when you first stop drinking, you feel like you need to give a reason. Because now I being sober for a while, I don't feel like I need it. I don't have, and you probably don't feel like you have to.
No, not at all. And in fact, here's what I know happens now. When people see that I'm not drinking, they drink less. Okay. Yeah. And the parties with this one social group I'd go to and where drinking was a significant component, everybody drinks less now. It would be, we would have maybe three drinks, maybe more sometimes if it was a longer party. And the last one I went to, I think the people that were drinking had just one. So, and I don't think they do it because they feel awkward drinking around us. I think it gives them permission to drink less when I'm not drinking, I guess. Or maybe I was just a terrible influence and I got people to drink more, but I don't think that was the case.
Well, I think everybody knows that they feel like a train wreck the next day. And you know what? BJ's not drinking and she's not drinking. And, so it kind of, people just end up not drinking. They're like, well, let's just, I like feeling good. And I know I'm not going to feel good if I drink tonight.
One of the things I love so much is, not only do I wake up earlier naturally, like now I wake up at insane times. I go to bed early, but it's like, it's 3:30, I can't get up. 4, maybe I can get up 4:30, but I'm 100% every morning.
Yes.
And I remember the times when I'd have some drinks and I'd go to bed and I was like, oh crap, I have a big business meeting tomorrow. What am I going to do? And I drink all this water and I do the little hydration and I do all these things. And now don't worry. I know every morning I'm going to be 100% top of my game, whether I'm in a meeting or surfing. top of my game. And I love that. I love that I'm not giving up. And I love mornings the most now.
Yeah.
And so it's like, I am not compromised, and I am just fully living the mornings, and I never worry that I'm going to be compromised the next morning. And I love that.
Amen to that. Okay, so let's talk about untangling bad habits for a minute. We already touched on it earlier. So explain the untangling of bad habits. If someone has a habit that they want to tell me how that.
And let me move to a topic. The method will still come through, but let me move to a topic where I've coached people, and I have, because I don't coach people in stopping drinking or addictions or things like that. But let's say bad snacking, right? So somebody's like, oh, I really want to stop unhealthy snacking. So what the thing to do is to list what are all the moments, or what all, think of a 24-hour cycle. What are the moments and times that you're eating snacks that are unhealthy? And just list those. And it might be, in the morning you have a candy bar, lunch break, you have a Twinkie, for lunch, you have Doritos and things like that. Just make a list. No judgment, just make the list. And then look at the list and say, okay, I'm going to pick one of these so think of all of those as a tangle, like unhealthy snacking. That's the bad habit. And notice it's not a behavior. It's a set of related behaviors. But by listing them, then you're like, okay, there it is. By the way, once you list them, your first response is going to be negative. You're going to feel sad. And I'm just going to warn you, but you'll get through it. You'll get through it. I just want to warn you that most people, when they list all that, whether it's social media use or procrastination or unhealthy snacking or snapping at my kids, by actually listing them, there's this moment of like, wow. I remember I did it for tidiness, and I listed all the ways I was untidy in the house. I looked, I was like, really? I thought of myself as a tidy person. It's like, fine.
It's the realization.
I was like, oh my gosh. But then you get through that when you make a plan. It's like, okay, here's the first one I'm going to tackle. Unhealthy snacking. I'm not going to have Doritos at lunch. I know how to do that. If I want a snack, I'll have something else. And I don't have to eat anything at all, but that's the first one I'm doing. And once you start making a plan how to untangle that specific thing, then what I found is your sadness about having such a big list then shifts, and it's like, oh, I see how I can start tackling this. And especially when you start succeeding with the Doritos for lunch, then you stop the candy bar in the morning, you go to the next easiest one and the next easiest one, and then you build momentum. One of my really dear friends, her name is Junie, and Junie's in the book. She's in the book, the Tiny Habits book, a couple of times. She untangled her sugar addiction habit. And that's something she never thought she would be able to do. And the story in the book, like all the stories in my book, are true. And she just went through and started pulling, what was the easiest sugar habit she had to untangle. She did that one and the next one. And then she describes it as she made progress. She didn't have to it was like the knot, the rope, it all fell away. So again, she started making progress with the easiest ones. And as she built confidence and momentum and had less fear, then the other ones just resolved on their own, which is kind of my experience with alcohol as well. So that's how I would move forward. Yes, create good, positive habits that you want. The more practice you have at creating habits, the more your skills of change will increase. And then you can take those skills and apply it to this harder thing and think of it as untangling and start with the easiest one first. And doesn't mean you're doing it all at once. And then there might be a moment, just like me. It's like, great, I'm done. I'm going to go the rest of the way now. And not moderation, I'm done. I am just done with alcohol or whatever it is you're struggling with.
Awesome. Awesome. We got a couple minutes left here. So BJ, do you want to share with people how they can find you, how they can learn more about Tiny Habits, more about you, more about the Behavior Design Lab and the work that you do over at Stanford?
Let me give 2 websites and then one free experience. Okay, so the book is Tiny Habits, and it's different than any other habits books that you've read. This is all new stuff, and it's all my stuff. It's not a summary of the past. So I guarantee it is totally different than what the tradition. tinyhabits.com. There's a free 5-day program there. Well, you'll work with a real human coach that I've trained. More about me in general is bjfogg.com. The free thing that's not available for most audiobooks is I got Audible. So Audible bought the rights to my audiobook. I got them to take my preface, which is about 15 minutes, and move it in front of the paywall. So if you go to audible.com, type in Tiny Habits, look down the page a few inches, and you will see a box that says, why the author chose to narrate his own book or something like that. You can click the button and listen. Usually they put it behind the paywall. But I negotiated to put it forward, and it's about 15 minutes. And I share, this is not in the print edition. When I wrote that, actually, I cried when I read it to my partner the morning before I recorded it. So I really share and reveal some struggles I've had in my life and how I tackled those. So I invite you to go to audible.com and listen to that preface and see if what I am sharing there and what I'm inviting people to do is something that resonates with you.
Awesome. Awesome. Thank you so much. I appreciate you so much. I appreciate your time today. I got a lot out of it, and hopefully other people did as well.
Thank you for your good work, Tim. Keep going. People need this, and I just so admire what you're doing, and thank you for inviting me to share.
Thanks again.